Hi, welcome back to the EV Life podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Maharaj, and I'm joined in studio by our producer, Hannah Neal Robertson.
Hi, I can't believe this is the last episode of the season.
I know. I feel like it went by pretty quickly.
It did. Do you have any highlights from the episodes that we did?
There was so much. I feel like we covered a lot of topics this season. And I mean, I feel like we always do, but you know, I'm kind of reflecting on some of the conversations that we've had. And one that's coming to mind is our conversation with Charge Hub around the Agora initiative and how great that will be for Canadian EV drivers and hybrid drivers to have that seamless charging option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, I really enjoyed the episode about the EV supply chain and just getting that background information on the different sectors involved.
And even if you're not an EV owner, right, just kind of learning about all the different processes to actually getting an EV. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Again, we covered so many topics, but I feel like the battery recycling episodes, we did one last season. And then of course we did one this season. That's always really popular with our listeners. And I get it, right? Because people want to know that those batteries are being recycled and repurposed. And, you know, one of the things that we learned this season was that lithium and the minerals within the electric vehicle batteries can be recycled numerous times. So it's not just learning about how the batteries are recycled and repurposed was really interesting.
Yeah, you can recycle those batteries, 2, 3, 4 times. And that's pretty awesome. And even just learning about the different charging solutions that are out there, like off-grid chargings for your EV, you can. That was a cool episode too.
In this episode, so our final episode, we bring on 2 Albertan drivers. One owns a hybrid vehicle and one owns an EV. And we really wanted to just kind of get that take from just everyday Albertans to find out what their experience has been like with an EV and a hybrid.
Yeah, they both have really interesting perspectives and insights on their experience so far. And I'm sure a lot of you will be able to maybe relate to them if you're an EV owner, or this might be new information and something that you learn if you aren't.
And, as we're wrapping up the season, we're also preparing for our next season. If you can believe that or not, it does take quite a bit of preparation. But we'd love to hear from you. If there is a topic that we haven't covered, or maybe we have covered it and you'd like us to take a different angle on that topic, we'd like to know what you want to hear from us next season. So you can always connect with us in the EV Life group on the AMA mobile app. You can share your thoughts on any of the episodes that we've aired so far, and also tell us what you'd like us to talk about in future seasons.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you.
And let's get into our final interviews of the season. So I'm joined first by Sherri, who is a hybrid owner. And then I'm joined by Manuel, who owns an EV. Hi, Sherri. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks, Crystal.
So I'm here to talk to you about your car. So you recently purchased a hybrid?
Yes. So we have a 2023 Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV.
And what made you decide to purchase a hybrid? Is this your first hybrid? Have you owned an EV in the past?
So we had just a regular hybrid before, a Honda Insight. And I was really adamant that we needed to stick with a hybrid because I just want to do what we can for the environment. My boyfriend was kind of against it just because he said financially it didn't really pay off over the 4 years that I like to keep a car. And so he actually started looking and found this plug-in hybrid, and there was some great rebates on it, and it actually made it cost effective for us to get. And it really, I think, is the best of both worlds for us.
How long have you been driving the plug-in hybrid now?
So the plug-in hybrid we've had for probably just 13 months now.
Okay, so just over a year. And what's your experience? What has your experience been like?
For the most part, it's been really good. I'm able to charge my car at work when I need to. We've been able to find chargers because it's a plug-in hybrid. The level 1 charger in our garage is fine. Like we just plug into the regular wall plug. So charging usually isn't an issue. We did just go on a trip. We actually drove down to California.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't find as many chargers as we had hoped. There are lots of Tesla chargers out there. And it did make me think that we may want to invest in getting some sort of adapter. But we also found it's a bit of a wild west right now with the charging, the cost for charging. Sometimes it's per minute, sometimes it's per kilowatt hour, sometimes it's free.
So you just never know what you're going to get.
You never know. And we even found some chargers that actually have just a regular plug-in on the side.
Okay.
So we could use our own cord and plug in on the side. Being in Canada, we have plug-ins in all parking lots, which is really nice.
Yeah.
But California doesn't have that same need.
They're not as cold.
Not as cold. But when we were in Palm Springs, we were able to find a local free charging station. So for us, the plug-in hybrid worked great because we still had gas as a backup. So if we weren't able to charge, we were still able to go on our trip.
Right. So for day-to-day, though, this is your day-to-day driver.
Yeah.
And how are you fueling up primarily? Are you using gas or are you primarily using the what do you call it?
Probably the electric.
The electric part, the battery.
Yeah, we're primarily using electric because, for the biggest trip I would take is to work every day. And so that's from the north side to the south side. So about half an hour. And it drains about half the battery. I'm able to charge enough at work to get home. And so it doesn't seem to be an issue. It's just if we're taking more trips in a day, so a day of running a lot of errands or heading out, anytime you go on the highways, it chews away a bit at the electric a little faster. And so there are times when we do have to go into using gas. Also, extreme temperatures, really hot or really cold, if we are trying to heat up the cabin interior or cool it down, it actually does force us to use a bit of gas that way.
Right. Do you know how much battery life you get out of the vehicle, like fully charged? How much driving time you'll get from the battery?
It doesn't calculate in terms of driving time, but it usually gives us a recommended number of kilometers. And that can vary. I think it bases it on our previous usage. So if I think we're around 80 kilometers on a full charge.
Okay.
But that's, I think, based on our
ideal
our current usage. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So is there anything surprising that you learned owning a plug-in hybrid?
Because they're new-ish on the market and for sure new to us, we didn't get a lot of support or even like education on our car and how to make the best use of it. There's a ton of settings that we could be using. I'm not sure when we should be using which one and why. And the dealership, was able to tell us what they knew, but it's not a lot. And I haven't really gone out to find. I know there are some organizations like EVAA that may be able to help, but they can't be an expert on every model of every EV that's out there.
So there's a lot of learning you kind of have to do yourself to figure things out. Mm-hmm. That's actually a really great thing to know for someone who's maybe considering purchasing a vehicle like yours or similar. Is there anything that you want to share with someone considering a plug-in hybrid as their next vehicle?
Yeah, I think a plug-in hybrid is a great option if you do want to make long trips from time to time because, we were able to drive to California with only having to stop for our brakes, not for the car to have to charge up or anything like that. So for me, right now, a plug-in hybrid really is the best of both worlds.
Right. Yeah. Because I know for road trips specifically, when you do have to kind of stop and charge, that does kind of add quite a few hours to your trip. So if you are like kind of constrained for time or you just want to get where you're going, like you said, you have the best of both worlds, right? You can switch to gas and be on your way.
Yeah. And really, even with that, even with having gone to California and using a fair bit of gas, our gas mileage right now is only at 4.7 liters per 100 kilometers, which for us is super high because we've been down under 1 liter per 100 kilometers. But in terms of like all vehicles on the road right now, it's still really good gas mileage.
That is really good. And do you know, like, I don't know if you off the top of your head would know this, but how much do you spend on average a month for gas?
Yeah, it's hard to say. So we got back from vacation on April 1st and we had gassed up in Airdrie. We still haven't run out of that tank of gas.
From April 1st.
From April 1st.
And just for our listeners, we're recording this on May 9th, so it's been over a month.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So with all the discounts we can find on gas when we do need it, it's, maybe a tank every 6 weeks.
Wow.
Minus the vacation, of course.
Yeah. Those are just a little different circumstances.
Yeah.
Well, Sherri, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing what your experience as a plug-in hybrid owner has been like. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, Crystal.
Hi, Manuel. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, Crystal. Thanks so much for having me.
So we're here to talk about what you drive. Can we start with what make and model of car do you drive?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we bought a Kia EV6 in November of last year.
And what made you decide to buy that?
Well, we did a lot of investigation into electric vehicles, and we were looking for something with the biggest range that we could get. Mm-hmm. And then we also wanted to be able to charge quickly, as quick as possible.
Right.
Even though we do 95% of our charging at home, we still, if you are on the road, you want to be on the road quickly again. And the Kia and Hyundais, they do have a battery architecture, which allows you to take in the quickest and most amount of energy at a time.
Can you give us an idea of how long it takes to charge, like what the charging times are? And I know it depends on if you're using level 1, level 2, level 3. And
even in level 3, there are so many different chargers, from 50 kilowatts to 150 and then 350. So if you're using a 50 kilowatt charger, it takes about an hour to an hour and a half to charge from 20 to full 100.
Wow, that's not bad at all.
No, it's not bad. But if you are lucky enough to have 150 or even 350, it even goes faster.
Right.
So you are from 20 to 80% in about 20 minutes. To 100, it then takes a little longer because the charging rate slows down a bit.
Right.
But overall, it's pretty good.
And you said you do most of your charging at home.
Yeah.
Do you just utilize the public charging if you're going on a longer distance trip?
That's right, yes.
And this is your daily driver, right?
Yes, we only have one vehicle, and that's the electric one, yeah.
Nice. And what has your experience been like? Oh, well, I guess I should backtrack and say, how long have you been driving this car?
For 6 months now.
6 months.
Yeah.
And is this your first EV?
That's our first EV, yes.
What's your experience been like?
It's been very good, actually. We've not had any challenges in the cold weather. Mm-hmm. Yes, you lose range, and quite a bit.
Right.
Which is understandable because the battery wants to keep itself at a nice temperature, so it's comfortable. And that's where you lose the range. But overall, we had no challenges starting the vehicle at minus 40, and it was standing outside for 8 hours.
You said you chose this model because of the range. In ideal conditions, how much range do you get?
We do get between 450 to 500 kilometers at ideal conditions.
Nice. And so in winter, what's your range loss?
That was quite a bit. I would say about 100 kilometers.
Okay.
So we never charge to 100% while we are in the city. Mm-hmm. We only charge to 80, which gives us 350 kilometers of range in ideal conditions. And then in winter, you get down to 250.
Okay, so still good if you're just commuting to work back and forth, right?
No issues whatsoever. The long distance driving in these cases would be a different story, but in the city, it's fine.
Have you taken any long distance trips with your EV yet?
We bought our vehicle in Saskatoon and drove it all the way to Edmonton. And even though we decided to charge twice, once would have sufficed. So we went to North Battleford, where we charged the first time just to try out the infrastructure.
You're excited?
Yeah, very much so. We rented a vehicle, we drove it all the way out to Saskatoon, and then on the way to Saskatoon, we checked out the 3 chargers on the road. Mm-hmm. And then we decided to charge twice, once in North Battleford and once in Lloydminster. And from Lloydminster, we went all the way back.
Was there anything surprising that you've learned now having driven an EV for 6 months? Did anything kind of surprise you?
No.
You were well prepared?
But I have to say that I did a lot of research, and I talked a lot about that research with my wife to make sure that we're all on the same page, that there are no surprises. I knew that I would lose range in the winter. We decided to install a level 2 charger at home so that we can charge at our convenience. And don't really have to say that, or can't really say that we had any surprises.
And so for someone who might be considering purchasing an EV, is there anything that you could share with them that might be helpful?
Definitely make sure that you do your research. That's the most important and crucial part. Don't get surprised by something that you might not have thought to investigate. Talk to people that own an EV.
Right.
We're more than happy to share what the experience we had. I had people asking, hey, what about if I have to drive outside the city? It depends.
Right.
If you want to go to Calgary, you have no issues. There are chargers all along the route. If you want to go up north, you might want to think about it.
A little bit of a charging desert up north. Yeah.
It still is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And do your research. Just talk to people and then make your decision.
And what has the vehicle itself been like? So now this is your first EV. You've been driving it for 6 months. How does it compare to your former ICE vehicle?
So the former vehicle we had was a 2012 Explorer, which we loved the car. Mm-hmm. It was great for us. The EV is different. We love the convenience that we don't have to stop at a gas station. When you want to get cheap gas, you go to Costco. It takes you 20 minutes to half an hour to get filled up.
Yeah.
In 20 minutes to half an hour, I can be almost fully charged as well at a level 3. But the convenience to going home, plugging the vehicle in, that's just unbeatable. And then the range anxiety disappears so quickly. When you take your phone out and it's at 10%, you know exactly that it's going to last you for another hour or 2, maybe 4. Mm-hmm. When my vehicle is at 10%, I still have 50 kilometers to go.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal.
So I've heard this from a lot of people who are EV owners. There was that range anxiety prior to purchasing the vehicle. And once you purchase it, it kind of goes away. That's what a lot of people are saying. It's when you first have the car and you see it dropping to 10% and 5%, you kind of start freaking out a little bit. But like you said, you kind of learn actually, no, I can get a decent amount of range before it actually dies.
That's right.
So you mentioned that you primarily charge at home. Have you seen a significant increase in your electricity bill?
So I've seen an increase, but it's not significant. We locked our rate in 2020, so we have a very, very cheap rate at 6.29 cents per kilowatt hour. So every time I charge, I pay around $2.50 in electricity, not considering the transmission costs and all the additional fees. So I did realize an increase, but not significantly, cost-wise.
And do you know how it compares to when you were fueling up your ICE vehicle, like what the difference is?
So I looked at that, and I'm a very data-driven person. So I have an Excel spreadsheet in which I note how much I charge. Yeah. Don't judge me on it, please. But I've looked at it now. We've driven 9,000 kilometers right now, and I would have roughly paid $1,300 for that in an ICE. So filling up an ICE vehicle. Right. To this point, I have not exceeded the $250 mark on electricity for the same range.
So quite a savings.
There is absolutely quite a savings. And at the end of the year, we're going to drive about 20,000 kilometers in our first year. I will have saved the cost of the charger.
Oh, wow. The cost of putting in the level 2 charger in your home?
That's right. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. I feel like that's information that a lot of potential EV buyers are curious to know. Well, Manuel, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. This was such a great conversation, and thank you for sharing with our listeners what your experience as an EV owner in Alberta has been like.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my conversations with Sherri and Manuel today. This is the last episode of this season of the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us for another season of the EV Life podcast. And we will be back for another season. So make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast and you'll be the first to know when that launches. And if there's a topic that you think that we should discuss next season, we want to hear from you. So join the EV Life group on the AMA mobile app and you can share your thoughts on what you think we should cover. And also if you have thoughts on any of the interviews that we've done this season or even past seasons. We love hearing from you and I can't wait to chat with you in the group. And I'll talk to you next season.